Have you ever really thought about what stops a company from just perfectly copying a famous perfume and selling it for way cheaper? I mean, for centuries, the entire fragrance industry was basically built on secrets. But what happens when technology comes along and makes keeping those secrets totally impossible? We're going to dive into how one single machine completely upended a billion-dollar industry and really changed how we think about owning something as invisible as a smell. So it really all boils down to this one question. Can you actually own a smell? And believe it or not, the answer to that question has completely reshaped this massive global industry, pitting, hundreds of years of tradition against some pretty slick modern chemistry. For the longest time, the answer was a pretty clear yes. You could own a smell as long as you could keep the formula under lock and key as a trade secret. But today, well, today the answer is a big resounding no. And the reason for that huge flip-flop is a single piece of tech that just blew the doors wide open on the industry's oldest and most important defense. So what was this thing, this game-changing invention? It wasn't some corporate spy. It wasn't a disgruntled perfumer. Nope, it was a machine. Okay, so it has a mouthful of a name, gas chromatography mass spectrometry, or just GCMS for short. But what it does is actually pretty simple to grasp. Think of it like a super advanced fingerprint scanner, but for smells. You feed a tiny, tiny drop of a fragrance into the machine, and it breaks it down molecule by molecule, telling you exactly what's in it and in what amounts. It literally just hands you the complete recipe on a silver platter. So this machine created like a triple threat to the whole industry. All of a sudden, copying a scent was fast, it was cheap, and maybe most importantly, it was perfectly legal to do. This just completely destroyed the value of those age-old trade secrets and left the fragrance world with a massive, massive problem. I mean, think about it. When your most valuable asset can be copied by basically anyone with a lab, you've got a choice to make, right? And history actually gives us a couple of really fascinating ways you can handle a crisis like this. We can call them the chartreuse model and the Meissen model. So first up, you've got the chartreuse model. The secret recipe for this famous green liqueur? It's been a closely guarded secret since the 1600s, protected by Carthusian monks. And how do they do it? Well, they take it to the extreme. These monks live a life of silence. And get this, at any one time, only 2 of them on the entire planet know the full recipe. Now that is what you call ironclad secrecy. And then, on the other hand, you have the Meissen model. Back in the 18th century, Meissen was the first in Europe to figure out the secret to making hard-paste porcelain. Huge deal. But within a few decades, their formula got stolen and leaked. So what did they do? They created a brand identity, that iconic crossed swords logo that was so powerful, so prestigious that even if you could copy their porcelain, you could never copy the feeling of owning a real Meissen. And this is where we get to the core of the problem for the perfume industry. We're talking about a global business with hundreds of thousands of employees. You just can't ask all of them to take a vow of silence, right? So the chartreuse model? Totally impossible. Which means, just like Meissen porcelain, the industry had to find another way forward. So, the next logical step was to turn to the law. Okay, if trade secrets are basically useless now, what about other kinds of intellectual property? Things like patents or copyrights. Well, this is where the whole story gets even more complicated, and honestly, even more interesting. Okay, let's break this down real quick. Trade secrets, as we've seen, are out. GCMS made them obsolete. Patents? That's a non-starter too, because to get a patent, your invention has to be useful. And by definition, a luxury perfume isn't about utility. Plus, you'd have to publish the formula for everyone to see, which, yeah, defeats the whole point. So that left one last desperate hope: copyright. The argument was actually pretty simple. They said, hey, a perfume is a work of art. It's an original creation just like a song or a painting. So its formula should be protected by copyright. And this one idea kicked off this enormous legal battle that raged in the French courts for almost 40 years. And man, what a roller coaster it was. In 1975, a court said no way. But then, fast forward to 1999, and a lower court actually compared a perfume formula to a musical score, hinting that maybe it could be protected. By 2006, things were looking really good. An appeals court granted copyright protection to a famous Lancôme perfume. It looked like they'd won. But then, in 2013, France's highest court, the Cour de Cassation, came in and delivered the final devastating blow. The court's final ruling really came down to this fascinating idea.
They said, look, we get that a ton of creativity goes into making a perfume. The problem isn't the creation. The problem is our human ability to perceive it. A smell is just too subjective. You and I might describe the same scent in completely different ways. That original thought behind it just can't be reliably communicated from person to person like a song or a book can. And just like that, the copyright dream was over.
So, if you can't protect the secret formula and you can't copyright the artistic creation, what in the world is left? Well, the industry had to get even more creative. It pivoted away from protecting the product itself and started protecting the entire experience around it.
And this led them to this really cool legal concept called trade dress. Now, this isn't about protecting one specific thing. It's about the total look and feel of a product. Like the unique shape of a Coca-Cola bottle or that very specific shade of blue on a Tiffany box. Those things can be legally protected. And here is where the pivot gets truly brilliant. The thinking became, okay, if we can't own the liquid in the bottle, we can own everything else associated with it. We can legally protect the bottle, the name, the box, the whole brand identity. We can own the brand.
So this led to this really interesting evolution in how they protect themselves. Step 1, you trademark the name. That's standard stuff. Step 2, you use trade dress law to protect the unique bottle design. But step 3, this is the real genius move. You use a signature scent not as your product, but as part of your store's trade dress, as part of the very atmosphere of your brand experience. And just to give you an idea of how new and cutting edge this really is, as of 2015, there were only 4. That's right, 4 active scent trademarks in the entire United States. We're talking about things like the specific smell of coconut that a beach apparel store pumps into its stores. This is a brand new frontier for intellectual property law.
And this brings us right to the present and to the future, because this strategy is now moving way beyond the perfume counter and into pretty much every part of our lives.
The really big shift here is that scent is no longer just the product being sold. It's now a strategic tool for marketing. It's all about creating this powerful, unforgettable sensory signature for a brand out in the real world, an identity that you can't just copy with a machine.
And I guarantee you have experienced this. Have you ever walked into an Omni hotel and noticed that specific lemongrass scent? Or smelled fresh-baked cookies at an open house you were looking at? That is not an accident. That is sensory branding. And it's all designed to create this powerful, subconscious, emotional connection to a place or a product. So if there's one thing to take away from this whole story, it's this. After losing the battle to protect its core product, the fragrance industry made this absolutely brilliant move. It transported the fragrance from the thing that needed protection into the very tool of protection. The scent itself is now a shield for the brand. Which leaves us with one last, kind of wild question to think about. The battle for the ownership of a smell was lost, but in its place, the war for our sensory identity was won. So as brands get better and better at branding the very air we breathe, you just have to wonder, what scents will they try to capture next?